Remove this stranger. He's embarrassing my wedding.
The music stops. 300 guests freeze mid-conversation. An older man stands at the entrance of the ballroom, his clothes worn and wrinkled, holding a small gift wrapped in newspaper. The bride's face flushes red with anger. She snaps her fingers at security. Remove this stranger. He's embarrassing my wedding. 2 guards grab the man by his arms. He looks across the room at the groom with eyes full of desperate hope. Michael, my son. I just wanted to see your happiness today. The bride gasps. Guests begin whispering. The groom stands there, frozen, unable to move or speak. How did a father nobody knew existed suddenly appear at the wedding? This story is deeper than you think. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Why didn't Michael tell his bride he had a father? Why did he claim he was an orphan on their marriage documents? Why did the bride, Sarah, react with so much anger and shame? And who truly is this old man? This wedding was built on secrets, secrets that refused to stay buried. Let me take you back to where it all began, because understanding this moment requires understanding 3 very different lives that collided on one unforgettable day. Michael Carter was 32 years old, a successful accountant at a downtown firm, respected by colleagues, trusted by clients. He drove a reliable sedan, paid his bills on time, and never caused trouble. But success hadn't come easily. Michael grew up in poverty, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. She died when he was 16, leaving him alone in the world. From that moment on, Michael told everyone the same story. I have no father. I'm alone. I built everything myself. The truth was more complicated, but Michael had convinced himself that his version was the only one that mattered. He was traumatized by the shame of his childhood, the whispers from neighbors, the judgment from other kids at school. He was determined to build a life far from that painful past, and he did. But you can't outrun your history forever, no matter how fast you run or how far you go. Sarah Montgomery came from a completely different world. Her family owned a chain of upscale restaurants across 3 states. She grew up in a mansion with a pool, attended private schools, vacationed in Europe every summer. She was beautiful, confident, and very particular about image and reputation. When she met Michael at a charity fundraiser 2 years earlier, she was immediately attracted to his quiet strength and ambition. He was different from the entitled men in her social circle. He was self-made, hard-working, humble. Her parents were skeptical at first. They always are when their daughter dates someone outside their class, but Michael won them over with his intelligence and manners. Sarah's mother, however, had one rule for the wedding: everything must be perfect, no surprises, no scandals, nothing that could embarrass the family name. Sarah agreed completely. This wedding would be flawless, or it wouldn't happen at all. Then there was Thomas Carter, the man nobody knew existed. Thomas was 63 years old, a former mechanic who once fixed cars with skill and pride. But his life took a devastating turn 30 years ago when he was wrongfully convicted of a crime he didn't commit. Michael was only 2 years old when his father was taken away. Thomas spent 25 years behind bars, writing letters that were never answered, making phone calls that were never returned, holding on to hope that grew thinner with each passing year. When he was finally released, the world had changed completely. His wife, Michael's mother, had passed away. His son was an adult, living a life Thomas knew nothing about. It took Thomas 3 years of searching, asking questions, following leads, before he finally found Michael. When he did, he approached carefully, hopefully, with a heart full of love and regret. But Michael slammed the door in his face. "You abandoned us," Michael said coldly. "I don't have a father." Thomas tried to explain, tried to show him the court documents proving his innocence, but Michael refused to listen. The pain was too deep, the wound too old. So Thomas respected his son's wishes and kept his distance, but he never stopped loving him, and he never stopped hoping for a second chance. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to hit the like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this one. 3 weeks before the wedding, Michael received a message on his phone from an unknown number. I know you told me to stay away. I respect that. But I heard you're getting married. I'm so proud of you, son. I just wanted you to know that. I won't bother you. I promise. Michael stared at the message for a long time. His hands were shaking. He didn't respond. He deleted the message and tried to forget about it, but he couldn't. 2 nights before the wedding, another message arrived. I'm in town. I brought a small gift. I just want to see you from afar. You won't even know I'm there. Michael panicked. He typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Finally, he sent nothing. He didn't tell Sarah. He convinced himself that his father wouldn't actually show up, that it was just empty words from a man he didn't know anymore. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, warm sunshine, a gentle breeze. The ceremony took place at an elegant estate with gardens and fountains. Sarah looked stunning in her custom-designed gown that cost more than most people's cars. Michael stood at the altar in his tailored suit, smiling, shaking hands, playing the role of the perfect groom. Everything was going exactly as planned. The ceremony was beautiful. The vows were heartfelt. The kiss was met with applause and cheers. Then came the reception, where the real celebration would begin. The ballroom was decorated with thousands of white roses, crystal chandeliers, silk tablecloths. A live band played softly in the corner. Guests mingled, laughing, sipping champagne, admiring the extravagant display of wealth and taste. That's when Thomas arrived. He had spent every dollar he had saved to buy a bus ticket to the city. He couldn't afford a suit, so he wore the only clean clothes he owned, a faded button-up shirt and old khaki pants. He had stayed up all night carving a small wooden sculpture, a bride and groom holding hands, the only gift he could afford to make. He wrapped it carefully in newspaper because he had no gift wrap. His hands trembled as he walked up the long driveway to the estate. Security stopped him at the entrance. Invitation, they asked. Thomas didn't have one. He tried to explain that he was the groom's father, but they didn't believe him. He stood there, uncertain, holding his small package, hoping to catch a glimpse of his son through the glass doors. Sarah saw him first. She was greeting guests near the entrance when she noticed a poorly dressed man loitering outside. She frowned. This was exactly the kind of thing her mother had warned her about, uninvited people trying to get free food and drinks at expensive events. She marched over to the head of security and pointed at Thomas. Remove him before guests start arriving and think he belongs here, she said firmly. The security team approached Thomas and asked him to leave. Thomas tried to explain again. Please, I just want to see my son for one moment. His name is Michael Carter. I'm his father. The guards exchanged glances. They had been given a guest list. There was no father of the groom listed anywhere. Sir, you need to leave now, or we'll have to escort you out forcibly, one guard said. That's when Michael walked outside to check on some detail with the catering staff. He froze when he saw his father standing there, surrounded by security, looking small and desperate and heartbroken. Their eyes met across the driveway. Thomas's face lit up with hope. Michael, he called out, his voice cracking. My son. I just wanted to see your happiness today. Michael couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. 30 years of pain, anger, confusion, and longing crashed over him all at once. Sarah appeared beside him. Do you know this man? She demanded. Michael opened his mouth, but no words came out. Sarah's eyes widened with realization and fury. Is this your father? The father you told me was dead. The word father echoed across the entrance. Guests began to turn and stare. Whispers spread like wildfire. What would you do if you were Michael in that moment? Would you defend your father or protect your wedding? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I really want to know what you think. Sarah grabbed Michael's arm and pulled him inside, away from the guests. You lied to me, she hissed. You lied on our marriage documents. You told my parents you had no family. Who is that man? Michael's voice was barely a whisper. He went to prison when I was 2. I grew up thinking he abandoned us. I only found out a few years ago that he was innocent, that he was wrongly convicted, but by then it was too late. I didn't know how to tell you. Sarah's mother appeared, having heard the commotion. If this man is related to you, why is he dressed like he lives on the streets? She asked with disgust. Michael felt something break inside him. He looked out the window at his father, who was still standing there, clutching his newspaper-wrapped gift, being surrounded by more security guards. Thomas wasn't trying to cause trouble. He was just a father who wanted to witness his son's joy. Michael realized in that moment how deeply he had failed the one person who never stopped loving him. Sarah was torn between compassion and pride, but pride won. "Then let him leave," she said coldly. "This is not the time for drama. Our guests are watching. My parents are humiliated. He needs to go now." Michael felt trapped between two worlds. The life he had built and the past he had denied. The pressure was suffocating. Outside, the guards were escorting Thomas away. He didn't resist. He just looked back one more time at the building where his son was getting married, memorizing the moment he would never be part of. Then something unexpected happened. An elderly woman, one of the guests from Michael's firm, walked out to her car for her phone charger. She saw Thomas being led away and something about his face looked familiar. She stopped. "Excuse me," she called out. "Are you Thomas Carter?" Thomas turned, surprised. "Yes, ma'am." Her eyes filled with tears. "I thought that was you. You're the man who went to prison for saving a child from a burning car 30 years ago. You took the blame to protect someone else's son. I was working as a paralegal on your case. I never forgot you. Make sure you're subscribed because the next part of this story will absolutely shock you. And you don't want to miss what happens next." The woman's voice carried across the entrance. Other guests began to gather. One by one, people who had heard of Thomas's story started speaking up. A judge who had reviewed his case years later confirmed he had been wrongfully convicted. A social worker revealed that Thomas had donated all his prison earnings to charity for underprivileged children. A journalist mentioned that Thomas had written letters to his son every week for 25 years, letters that were intercepted and never delivered. Suddenly, the stranger wasn't a stranger anymore. He was a hero. A father who had sacrificed everything. A man who had survived injustice and still came to his son's wedding with nothing but love. Michael heard the voices from inside. He pushed through the crowd and ran outside. He saw his father sitting on the curb, defeated, crying quietly into his hands. Michael dropped to his knees in front of him. "Forgive me," Michael said, his voice breaking. "Dad, forgive me. I didn't know. I didn't understand." Thomas looked up at his son, tears streaming down his weathered face. "A father never stops waiting for his child," he said softly. "Even after 25 years. Even after a lifetime." They held each other and cried, right there on the curb, while guests watched from the doorway, many wiping their own tears. Sarah approached slowly. She had heard everything. She had seen the court documents that guests were showing each other on their phones. She had watched her husband collapse into his father's arms. She felt ashamed, deeply and painfully ashamed. "Sir," she said quietly, "I'm so sorry. I judged you by your appearance, not by your heart. Please come inside. You belong here more than anyone." Thomas handed her the newspaper-wrapped gift. Inside was the wooden carving he had made. A bride and groom holding hands, carved with trembling hands and endless love during sleepless nights leading up to this day. Sarah held it like it was made of gold, because in that moment, she understood that it was worth more than everything else at the wedding combined. The reception continued, but everything had changed. Thomas sat at the head table with his son. Guests came to shake his hand, to hear his story, to apologize for their assumptions. Sarah's parents, humbled and moved, welcomed him into the family. The father-son dance was the most emotional moment of the entire night. Thomas, who had missed every milestone, every birthday, every achievement, finally got to dance with his son at his wedding. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Here's what I want you to think about. If you were the bride, what would you have done when you first saw Thomas at the entrance? Would you have reacted the same way Sarah did? Or would you have given him a chance? And if you were Michael, could you have forgiven a father who you believed abandoned you? Could you have opened your heart after 30 years of pain? Drop your answers in the comments. I really want to hear your perspective on this. Respect is not earned by wealth or appearance. It is earned by the battles a person has survived. Thomas Carter survived wrongful imprisonment, poverty, rejection, and heartbreak, but he never stopped being a father. Michael Carter learned that day that forgiveness is not about erasing the past, It's about making space for a new future. And Sarah learned that the most valuable people at a wedding aren't the ones wearing designer clothes or expensive jewelry. They're the ones who show up with nothing but love. 6 months after the wedding, Thomas moved into a small apartment near Michael and Sarah. He became a grandfather when their first child was born a year later. He carved toys for his grandchildren, told them stories, and taught them that love is the only inheritance that truly matters. The wooden sculpture from the wedding sits on their mantel, a reminder that the greatest gifts are often wrapped in newspaper and carried by trembling hands. So let me ask you one final question. Would you welcome a lost parent into your life, even after decades apart? Would you be willing to forgive, to start over, to give love a second chance? Think about that, because we all have someone in our lives who is waiting for us to open the door. Subscribe for more stories that remind us. Every person you meet carries a story you know nothing about. Thank you for watching, and remember, the next time you judge someone by their appearance, ask yourself what battles they might have survived just to be standing in front of you. See you in the next video.